After 10 years, the millionaire visits his ex on the farm. What she was hiding left him shocked. A beautiful story for my amazing family. God bless you all. Don't forget to like and comment. I'm here and ready. Let's begin with love. Some men spend their lives building empires to escape the ruins they left behind. But Stuart Stone discovered that marble floors echo louder with emptiness than dirt roads ever did. The rain came without warning that summer evening, turning the country road into a river of mud and reducing visibility to nothing. Stuart's car sputtered once, twice, then died completely, leaving him stranded on a stretch of highway that seemed to exist outside of time itself. He sat there for a moment, watching water cascade down the windshield, wondering how a simple drive to assess a property could go so spectacularly wrong. Then he saw the light. It flickered through the downpour like a beacon, warm and golden, spilling from the windows of an old farmhouse set back from the road. Stuart grabbed his jacket, knowing it would do nothing against the deluge, and ran. The porch appeared through sheets of rain, and so did she. Ileana stood in the doorway wrapped in a cotton robe, her hair loose around her shoulders, holding a mug that steamed in the cool air. She didn't look surprised to see a drenched stranger stumbling onto her grandmother's porch. Instead, she looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations before a single word was spoken. "Your car?" she asked, her voice like honey over gravel. "Dead," Stuart managed, water running down his face. She stepped aside without hesitation. "Come in before you catch your death." The farmhouse interior wrapped around him like a memory he'd never had. Worn wooden floors that creaked with history, walls covered in photographs of people whose smiles felt genuine, a fire crackling in a stone hearth that looked like it had been warming this space for generations. Everything about it contradicted the steel and glass world Stuart inhabited, and he felt something in his chest loosen that he hadn't realized was clenched. Ileana handed him a towel without ceremony. "There's coffee if you want it. Real coffee, not that city water you probably drink." Stuart laughed, surprising himself. "You can tell I'm from the city? You wear it like cologne," she said, moving to the kitchen. "Expensive shoes. Watch, that costs more than my truck. That look in your eyes like you're calculating the property value of everything you see." He should have been offended. Instead, he was fascinated. "And what else do my eyes say?" She poured 2 cups of coffee, adding something from an unmarked bottle that made the liquid shimmer. "That you're lost, and not because of the rain." The truth of it hit him so hard he had to sit down. They talked through the storm. Not the polite conversation of strangers, but the raw, unfiltered kind that happens when 2 people recognize something essential in each other. Ileana told him about the farm, about her grandmother who'd raised her after her parents died, about the way the land taught you things that books never could. Stuart found himself confessing things he'd never said aloud, about the weight of expectations he'd carried since childhood, about building a life that looked perfect but felt hollow. "Why do you do it then?" Ileana asked, curling into the chair across from him, firelight dancing across her face. "Because it's what's expected. Because I'm good at it. Because I don't know what else I'd be." "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," she said softly, and there was no judgment in it, only a compassion that made his throat tight. Dawn arrived, without either of them noticing. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. Stuart stood to leave, knowing he should, knowing this night had been some kind of beautiful accident that couldn't be repeated. "Come back," Ileana said from the doorway, and it wasn't a question. He came back the next day, and the day after that. What started as curiosity became necessity. Stuart would finish his work and drive the winding roads to the farmhouse, where Ileana would be waiting with that knowing smile, with coffee that tasted like coming home, with conversations that unraveled him piece by piece. They made love for the first time under a summer moon, in the tall grass behind the barn, where fireflies danced like fallen stars. Ileana's skin was warm beneath his hands, her breath soft against his neck, and Stuart felt something crack open inside him that he didn't know had been sealed. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, and she traced patterns on his chest that felt like a language he was just learning to read. "What are we doing?" he whispered into her hair. "Living," she answered simply. Maybe for the first time, the summer stretched into something golden and impossible. Stuart rearranged his entire existence around being with her. Morning coffee on the porch where they'd talk about everything and nothing. Afternoons working on the farm where she'd laugh at his city soft hands struggling with real labor. Evenings cooking together in that warm kitchen, their movements synchronizing like a dance they'd known forever. Nights tangled in her grandmother's old bed, learning each other's bodies with a reverence that felt sacred. Eliana showed him the property boundaries one sunset, walking the fence line hand in hand. "My grandmother left me this land, but I want to build something more. A real farm, sustainable and beautiful. Something that feeds people, body and soul." Stuart pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Then we'll build it together. My work gives us resources, your vision gives us purpose. We'll create something extraordinary." She looked up at him with eyes full of stars. "You mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life." They planned it all in whispered conversations. How Stuart would handle the financial side while Eliana shaped the vision. How they'd split their time between the city and the farm until they could make the farm their permanent home. How they'd fill that old farmhouse with laughter and children and all the warmth it was built to hold. Stuart bought a ring during a trip to the city. Nothing ostentatious, just a simple band with a stone that caught the light like Eliana's eyes caught his heart. He carried it everywhere, waiting for the perfect moment, though every moment with her already felt perfect. One morning, he woke to find her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Something luminous and terrifying and beautiful all at once. "What is it?" he asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She opened her mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it. "Nothing. Just happy," but there was something more, something dancing just behind her words that he couldn't quite grasp. "I have to go back to the city for a few days," he said reluctantly. "Family meeting about some accounts that need reviewing. But when I get back, I want to talk about making this permanent. About you and me and the life we're going to build." Eliana's smile was radiant. "I'll be here. I'll always be here." He kissed her goodbye on that porch where everything had started, neither of them knowing it would be the last kiss that tasted like promise instead of ash. Stuart drove away, watching her in the rearview mirror. One hand pressed to her stomach in a gesture of protection he didn't understand. Her figure growing smaller until she vanished. Completely, the ring burned in his pocket like a coal of future joy. He had no idea he was driving toward the end of everything. Chapter 2. The Poison of Duty. The conference room felt like a tomb dressed in mahogany and leather. Stuart walked in expecting routine discussions about quarterly reports, maybe some debate about expansion strategies. Instead, he found his mother sitting at the head of the table with the family attorney on one side and their accountant on the other, their faces carrying the grave expressions usually reserved for funerals. "Sit down, Stuart," his mother said, her voice devoid of warmth. The folder she slid across the polished wood might as well have been a death certificate. Stuart opened it to find financial statements that transformed his understanding of reality. The family company that had seemed unshakable was hemorrhaging money, had been for years, hidden behind creative accounting and desperate measures. They were months away from complete collapse. "How?" Stuart breathed, the word barely escaping his constricted throat. "Your father made some unfortunate investments before he passed," his mother said clinically, as if discussing a disappointing restaurant. "I've been trying to correct course, but the damage runs too deep. We're going to lose everything unless we act decisively and immediately." Stuart's mind raced through possibilities, through solutions, through any path that didn't feel like falling. "We can restructure, bring in outside investors, cut costs until we stabilize." "We've exhausted those options," the attorney interjected. "The debt is too substantial, the market confidence too damaged. No reputable investor will touch us." His mother leaned forward, and Stuart saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Not malice, but a cold calculation that came from years of protecting what mattered at any cost. There is one solution. The Whitmore family has offered a merger through marriage. Their daughter, their resources, their connections. It saves everything. The ring in Stuart's pocket suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. You're asking me to marry someone I don't love to save the company. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. I'm not asking, Stuart. I'm telling you this is what must be done. His mother opened another folder, this one containing photographs. Factory floors filled with workers, families at company picnics, retirement parties for employees who'd given their entire lives to the Stone name. These people depend on us, 300 families who will lose everything if we go under. Their mortgages, their children's educations, their entire futures rest on what you decide in this room today. Stuart stared at the faces in the photographs. Old men who'd worked the factory floor since before he was born. Young mothers who'd just started their careers. Children playing at company events, innocent and unaware that their security hung by a thread. There has to be another way, he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew the truth. His mother wouldn't have arranged this ambush unless every other avenue had been exhausted. The Whitmore girl is perfectly acceptable, his mother continued. Well-educated, from good family, understands the nature of strategic marriages. She's not expecting a love match any more than you should be. It's a partnership, nothing more. I'm in love with someone, Stuart said quietly. His mother's expression didn't change. Love is a luxury we cannot afford. You can keep your farm girl as a companion if you're discreet, but the marriage must happen. The announcement has already been prepared, pending your cooperation. The casual cruelty of it stole his breath. Her name is Eliana. Her name is irrelevant to the 300 families who are about to lose everything. Stuart spent that night walking the city streets. The ring still in his pocket, Eliana's face haunting every step. He thought about calling her, about running back to the farm and hiding in that perfect bubble they'd created. But then he'd see a family eating dinner through a restaurant window, a father laughing with his children. And he'd remember all the families whose fathers wouldn't be laughing if Stuart chose his own happiness. He found himself at his father's grave as dawn broke, staring at a headstone that proclaimed him a pillar of the community, a man of honor. Stuart wondered if his father had ever faced a choice like this, if honor always meant sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's needs. What do I do? He asked the stone, but the dead offered no counsel. The morning brought clarity of the worst kind. Stuart understood with terrible certainty that he couldn't let hundreds of families suffer because he'd fallen in love. The math was simple and brutal, his happiness against their survival. One man's heart against countless livelihoods. His mother was waiting in her study when he returned. She knew his answer before he spoke it, reading the defeat in his posture like a book she'd written herself. I'll do it, Stuart said, each word tearing something loose inside him. But I tell her myself. I explain why. I don't just disappear. His mother's nod was almost respectful. The wedding is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. Make it quick and make it final. No drawn-out goodbyes, no promises you can't keep. Clean breaks heal faster. Stuart drove back to the farm that afternoon, every mile feeling like a march to his own execution. He'd rehearsed what to say, how to explain, but all the words seemed inadequate to contain the magnitude of what he was about to destroy. Eliana was on the porch when he arrived, and the joy on her face nearly broke him before he could speak. She ran to him and he caught her, holding her tight enough to memorize the feeling, knowing it was the last time. I have something to tell you, she said against his chest, her voice bubbling with barely contained excitement. Wait, Stuart interrupted, gently pushing her back so he could see her face. I need to say something first, please. The happiness dimmed in her eyes, replaced by something wary and afraid. Stuart told her everything. About the company collapse, about the families, about the marriage that would save them all. He explained it clinically because emotion would have shattered him, laying out the facts like evidence in a trial where the verdict was already decided. He told her he loved her, but that love wasn't enough when weighed against so many lives. Eliana listened without interrupting, her face growing still as stone, her hand unconsciously moving to rest against her stomach. When he finished, the silence stretched so long, he wondered if she'd ever speak again. "So you're choosing them over me," she finally said, her voice eerily calm. "I'm choosing 300 families over one," Stuart said, hearing the hollowness in his own justification. "Over us," Eliana corrected. "You're choosing what looks noble over what's real. You're choosing the comfortable martyrdom of duty over the hard work of love." Her words cut because they held truth he didn't want to face. "I don't have a choice," Stuart said desperately. "Everyone has a choice, Stuart. You're just making yours." Eliana stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I need you to leave now, before sunrise. Pack your things and go, and don't ever come back to this place. Eliana, please." "No!" The word cracked like a whip. "You don't get to ease your guilt with long goodbyes. You made your decision. Now live with it." Stuart wanted to argue, to explain more, to make her understand. But the look in her eyes told him there was nothing left to say. He'd chosen his path, and now he had to walk it. He gathered his few belongings in numb silence while Eliana stood at the window, her back to him, her hand still pressed against her stomach. He wanted to ask what she'd been about to tell him, but the moment had passed, burned away by the choices he'd made. At the door, he turned back one last time. "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." Eliana didn't turn round. "Goodbye, Stuart." He drove away as the sun rose, watching the farmhouse disappear in his mirror. He didn't see Eliana collapse on the porch, didn't see her finally cry, didn't see her pull out the positive pregnancy test she'd taken that morning. The news she'd been bursting to share. Stuart Stone married the Whitmore girls 6 weeks. Later, in a ceremony that looked perfect and felt like dying, neither of them smiled in the wedding photos. Chapter 3. The Silent Goodbye. Eliana stood on the porch long after Stuart's car disappeared, watching dust settle on a road that suddenly felt like the edge of the world. Her hand remained pressed against her stomach, protecting the secret that would now shape everything, the life growing inside her that Stuart would never know about. She'd been about to tell him, the words formed and ready, joy spilling over like sunrise. Then he'd spoken first, and the world had ended quietly without drama, with the terrible civility of two people realizing that love alone could never be enough. Her grandmother found her there, hours later. Still standing, still staring, tears dried on her face like river marks. "Child," the old woman said softly, knowing without asking that something fundamental had shattered. "He's gone," Eliana whispered. "He chose duty over us, over what we could have been." Her grandmother wrapped her in arms that had held generations of heartbreak. "Then he chose wrong, and you'll choose better." The pregnancy test remained in Eliana's pocket, a secret burning like coal. That night, sitting at the kitchen table where she and Stuart had planned impossible futures, Eliana made the hardest decision of her life. She would keep this child, raise it alone, build a life that didn't include the father who'd walked away, not out of spite but out of self-preservation. A man who chose convenience over love once would do it again. She wouldn't subject her child to that uncertainty, wouldn't spend years waiting for him to choose them second. She wrote him no letter, made no phone call, sent no message. She simply vanished from the life they'd shared, leaving behind only memory and might-have-beens. The morning sickness started soon after, violent and unrelenting. Eliana worked through it, her grandmother covering for her when she had to run from customers at the farm stand they operated. She went to her first doctor's appointment alone, gripping her grandmother's old truck steering wheel with white knuckles. "Congratulations," the doctor said, pointing to the ultrasound screen. "You're having twins." Eliana stared at the two tiny heartbeats flickering on the monitor, and something inside her that had been broken started to reshape itself into something stronger. Not healed, but transformed. 2 babies. 2 lives that would depend entirely on her. The weight of it was crushing and liberating all at once. She worked harder than she'd ever worked, turning the small farm into something that could support 3 people. Her hands bled and calloused. Her back ached constantly. Her grandmother helped when she could, but age had made her frail, and Eliana carried most of the burden alone. Some nights she cried from exhaustion and fear and the overwhelming terror of what she'd taken on. Other nights she sat with her growing belly, talking to the babies inside, promising them a life full of love, even if it lacked a father. Stuart married his strategic bride in a ceremony Eliana only heard about through mutual acquaintances who didn't know about the summer they'd shared. She burned the newspaper clipping someone thoughtfully sent, watching his face in formal wear turn to ash, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, just the hollow acknowledgement that he'd made his choice and now lived with its consequences. Labor came early on a winter morning, fierce and fast. Her grandmother drove her to the hospital with shaking hands, and Eliana went through the next hours in a haze of pain and terror and primal determination. The first baby emerged screaming, indignant at this bright, cold world. The second followed minutes later, quieter but just as perfect. Girls, the nurse announced unnecessarily. As if Eliana couldn't see the miracles in her arms, she named them there, alone, except for her grandmother. Olivia, meaning peace. Amelia, meaning work. Together, they represented everything Eliana hoped to build, a life of purposeful peace, earned through honest labor. The first year passed in a blur of sleepless nights and relentless days. Eliana discovered reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. She learned to feed one baby while changing the other, to work with infants strapped to her chest, to survive on fragments of sleep, stitched together with desperation and love. Her grandmother helped until her health failed completely, passing quietly one night while the twins slept, leaving Eliana truly alone. She grieved while planting spring crops, tears mixing with dirt, the twins watching from a blanket spread in the shade. Life didn't stop for sorrow. The farm demanded attention. The babies needed care, and Eliana had no choice but to keep moving forward. By the twins' second birthday, Eliana had transformed the small farm into something remarkable. Organic vegetables that restaurants fought to buy, flowers that graced weddings throughout the region, a roadside stand that drew customers from surrounding towns. She built it all through sheer will and bleeding determination, creating something beautiful from the ashes of what she'd lost. The twins grew into bright, curious creatures who knew only their mother's love. Olivia, gentle and dreamy, preferred reading to running. Amelia, fierce and bold, climbed everything and asked endless questions. They shared their mother's eyes and her determination, but in their smiles, in certain angles of their faces, Stuart lived on. A ghost neither girl knew haunted them. Eliana never spoke his name. When the twins asked about their father, as children inevitably do, she told them a careful truth stripped of emotion. Their father had made choices that meant he couldn't be part of their lives, and that was his loss, not theirs. She refused to poison them with bitterness, but she also refused to paint him as a hero. He was simply absent, and their family was complete without him. Years accumulated like layers of sediment. The twins started school, excelled, made friends, lived full lives rich with their mother's fierce love. Eliana dated occasionally. Careful men who understood she came as a package with 2 daughters and a farm that demanded everything. None of them lasted. She was too independent, too self-sufficient, too shaped by abandonment to fully trust again. The farm expanded. Eliana bought adjacent parcels when they came available, hired seasonal workers, built greenhouses that allowed year-round growing. She became known throughout the region as the woman who'd built an empire from dirt and determination. People respected her, admired her, told stories about her strength. She accepted their praise with grace and privately acknowledged that strength was simply what happened when you had no choice but to be strong. Stuart's name occasionally surfaced in business publications her customers would mention. His marriage, apparently, was as hollow as she'd suspected. No children, no joy visible in the rare photographs. Just two people fulfilling obligations, maintaining appearances, slowly dying inside expensive homes and cold beds. Eliana felt nothing when she heard these things. Not satisfaction, not sympathy, just a distant acknowledgement that they'd both paid prices for the choices made that summer. His payment was a life of comfortable misery. Hers was a life of difficult joy. She knew which one she preferred. The twins turned 9, intelligent and beautiful, their personalities fully formed. Olivia wanted to be a writer, filling notebooks with stories about magical farms and adventure. Amelia wanted to be a scientist, conducting elaborate experiments with plants and insects. Both of them helped on the farm, learning the rhythms of growth and harvest, understanding that everything worth having required patient work. Eliana built them a good life, not perfect but honest, not wealthy but secure, not traditional but full of love in all its fierce, protective intensity. She thought she'd moved past the summer that had changed everything, thought she'd built walls strong enough to keep the past from seeping through. Then Stuart's stone reappeared, and all her carefully constructed defenses revealed themselves as paper-thin as the lies she'd told herself about being over him. Chapter 4. The Farm of Truths. The morning started like any other, with Eliana rising before dawn to check the irrigation system that kept her expanded fields thriving. The twins still slept, curled together in the room they insisted on sharing despite having separate bedrooms. Eliana moved through the quiet farm with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd walked these paths so many times. Her feet knew every stone. She didn't notice the car parked down the road, didn't see the figure watching from the shadows. She had no idea that the bubble of peace she'd built over the years was about to burst. Olivia woke first, as she usually did, and went to water the plants in the front garden before breakfast. It was her favorite chore, quiet time with the flowers before the day's noise began. She hummed while she worked, lost in thoughts about the story she was writing, about the heroine who lived in a magical farmhouse not unlike her own. "Who are you?" Olivia startled, the watering can tilting dangerously. A man stood by the fence, watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. He was tall and looked tired, wearing clothes that seemed too expensive for standing in farm dirt. "First tell me who you are," Olivia countered, with the boldness her mother had instilled in both daughters. "Why are you on our property?" The man stared at her like she was a ghost, his face cycling through emotions Olivia couldn't name. He opened his mouth to answer, just as Eliana emerged from the tiny cottage they'd converted from her grandmother's old storage shed. Amelia at her side. The world stopped. Eliana saw Stuart and felt the earth drop away beneath her feet. Time collapsed, and she was simultaneously the girl who'd loved him and the woman who'd survived his absence. Every carefully built wall inside her cracked, fury flooding through the fissures like water through a dam. "Get off my property!" Her voice came out low and deadly, vibrating with rage she'd thought she'd buried. Right now. Olivia looked between her mother and the stranger, confusion written across her features. Amelia immediately stepped closer to Eliana, sensing threat the way she always did, her small body a shield. Stuart stood frozen, looking between Eliana and the girl by the fence. Olivia's eyes grey as storm clouds, identical to his own. The pieces connecting in his mind with the weight of falling buildings. "You knew," Eliana said, the words like glass. "You've been coming here, watching, stalking my family like some kind of ghost. How long?" Stuart's voice cracked on the words. "How long have they been here?" "That's none of your concern." Eliana grabbed Olivia's hand, pulling her daughter close. "Girls, go inside, now." "But Mom," Olivia started. "Now," Eliana repeated, her tone brooking no argument. The twins obeyed, but Olivia looked back once before the door closed, her curious eyes meeting Stuart's identical ones, a question forming that would change everything. Eliana waited until the door shut before unleashing the storm she'd contained for their sake. "You have no right to be here. You lost that right when you walked away and never looked back." I didn't know, Stuart said desperately. Eliana, I swear I didn't know about them until recently. If I'd known, you'd have what? Done your duty? Sent money? Visited on holidays, between your important meetings and your strategic marriage. Eliana's laugh was sharp enough to cut. I made sure you didn't know, because I knew exactly what would happen. You'd have chosen them the way you chose everything else, with careful calculation of how it affected your life, not theirs. Stuart flinched, but didn't back away. That's not fair. Fair? The word exploded from Eliana like a gunshot. You want to talk about fair? I'll tell you about fair, Stuart. Ver was finding out I was pregnant 3 days after you left. Ver was going through 9 months of terror alone, wondering how I'd possibly manage. Ver was nearly dying in labor with nobody's hand to hold because their father chose saving face over loving me. Ver was watching my grandmother work herself to death, helping raise babies that weren't her responsibility. Ver was explaining to 2 little girls why they didn't have a daddy like other children, while you played house with someone else's daughter. Each word landed like a physical blow, and Stuart took them all, his face draining of color. I didn't know, he repeated weakly, because I made sure you didn't know. Because a man who abandons you once will do it again, and I refuse to subject my daughters to that uncertainty. Eliana's voice dropped to something cold and final. They are my daughters, Stuart, mine. I carried them, birthed them, raised them through every fever and fear and triumph. You're just the man who contributed biology and nothing else. I came here because I found out about the farm, about you being here. I've been trying to work up the courage to approach for months. So you've been watching us like a stalker instead? That's supposed to make this better? Eliana's fury reignited. Every time you came here, every time you watched from the shadows, you violated the life we built without you. Stuart pulled something from his pocket, a photograph worn from handling. It showed the farmhouse, as it had been that summer. Eliana standing on the porch, laughing at something off camera. I never stopped thinking about you, about what we had died the moment you chose money over love. Eliana snatched the photograph and tore it in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall like confetti between them. That girl doesn't exist anymore. You killed her when you left. I was trying to save people, Stuart said, and hearing his own justification out loud made it sound as hollow as it felt. You were saving yourself from hard choices. It's easier to be the noble martyr than the man who fights for what he loves. Eliana's eyes held nothing but contempt. Well, congratulations. You saved your company, married your appropriate wife, lived your appropriate life. I hope it was worth it. My wife left me 5 years ago. The marriage was hell, and when it ended, I've been alone ever since, drowning in everything I sacrificed for nothing. And I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? Eliana's voice could have frozen fire. You had a comfortable hell, Stuart. I had actual one. The difference is, I built something beautiful from my ashes. What did you build from yours? Stuart had no answer. I want you to leave, Eliana said with terrible finality. Leave and never come back. Those girls don't need you. They've never needed you. I've made sure they have everything that matters. They're my daughters, Stuart said, the words feeling strange and true and impossible all at once. They're children who share half your genetics. That doesn't make you a father. It makes you a donor. Eliana stepped closer, and Stuart saw in her face the warrior she'd become. You want to know what makes a father? It's being there at 3 a.m. when they're sick. It's teaching them to ride bikes and holding them when they fall. It's working yourself to exhaustion so they have everything they need. It's showing up every single day, whether it's convenient or not. You haven't earned the title of father, and you don't get to walk in here after all these years and claim them because your own life fell apart. Inside the house, Olivia pressed against the window, watching her mother face down the stranger. Amelia stood beside her, their hands linked. Both girls sensing that whatever was happening would change everything, even if they didn't understand how. Stuart looked past Eliana to the window wwhere his daughters watched, their faces identical masks of curiosity and concern. He saw his eyes repeated in features that were otherwise purely Eliana's, saw the life he could have had staring back at him through glass. "I'm not leaving," he heard himself say. "I've spent years running from mistakes. I'm done running." Eliana's expression promised violence. "Then I'll get a restraining order. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my daughters from you. Do what you have to do. But I'm not walking away again." Stuart met her eyes, with something like the man he'd been that summer, buried but not dead. "I'm buying the property adjacent to yours. I'm going to be here whether you like it or not." The fury in Eliana's face transformed into something colder and more dangerous. "Then I'll make sure every day you're here is hell. You want to play father now? Fine, but you'll do it on my terms, following my rules. Knowing that those girls will never call you dad, because you don't deserve that honor." She turned and walked back to her daughters, leaving Stuart standing in the dirt of a farm built on his absence, finally understanding that some choices echo for years, reshaping everything they touch, and no amount of regret can ever call back time. Chapter 5. The Confession of Shadows. Stuart kept his word in the most painful way possible. He bought the abandoned property bordering Eliana's farm, a piece of land that had gone to seed and ruin. Instead of hiring contractors to restore it, he showed up at dawn the next morning with work gloves and determination etched into every line of his body. Eliana watched from her kitchen window as he cleared brush with hands clearly unaccustomed to real labor, his expensive clothes quickly stained with sweat and dirt. She felt nothing but cold satisfaction watching him struggle, hoping he'd give up and disappear back to whatever gilded life he'd built for himself. He didn't give up. Day after day, Stuart appeared at sunrise, working through brutal heat and his own physical limitations. Blisters formed and burst on his palms. His back screamed from unaccustomed labor, but he kept working, transforming the derelict property inch by painful inch, never crossing onto Eliana's land, never approaching the house where his daughters lived. The twins watched this strange ritual with growing fascination. Livia asked careful questions that Eliana deflected with practiced ease. Amelia watched with suspicious eyes, sensing her mother's turbulent emotions, even if she didn't understand their source. 2 weeks after Stuart's first appearance, Eliana walked to the property line where he was repairing a collapsed fence. He looked up as she approached, his face hopeful until he saw her expression. "I know you've been coming here longer than you admitted," Eliana said without preamble. "My neighbor mentioned seeing your car parked down the road for months." "How long, Stuart? How long have you been watching my family?" Stuart set down his tools, accepting that this reckoning had been inevitable. 6 months. "I found out about the farm 6 months ago through a casual business report that mentioned your name. I drove here not knowing what I'd find, and I saw them. Our daughters. I saw them playing in the yard, and the world stopped. So you've been stalking us for half a year." Eliana's voice could have cut steel. "Did it ever occur to you to just approach like a normal person?" "I was paralyzed," Stuart admitted. "Every time I tried to drive up to the house, I'd remember your face the day I left. I'd imagine the confrontation, the anger, the questions I couldn't answer. So I watched from a distance like a coward, trying to work up courage I should have had years ago. You had no right to watch them without my knowledge. Every moment you stole from the shadows was a violation." Eliana's hands clenched into fists. "Did you enjoy it? Seeing what you walked away from? Watching the life you could have had?" "It was torture," Stuart said quietly. "Watching you be everything I should have been. Seeing them grow and laugh and exist without needing me at all. Realizing that my absence didn't create a void, it just meant you filled every space yourself." "Damn right I did." Eliana's voice shook with barely contained rage. "You want to know what those 6 months you were lurking looked like from the inside? Olivia's science project won first place at the regional fair, and she asked me 3 times if fathers were supposed to come to those events. Amelia broke her arm falling from the barn loft, and she cried not from pain, but because all the other kids at the hospital had dads holding their hands. Every milestone, every moment, I had to be enough for 2 parents. And you watched from the bushes like a ghost, too afraid to haunt properly. Stuart absorbed each word like a blow to the chest. My business wife, Udwy said, the term bitter on his tongue, left me 5 years ago. She told me she couldn't compete with a ghost, that I'd never fully been present in our marriage because I was always elsewhere. She was right. I spent 5 years married to someone I didn't love, then 5 more years alone, slowly realizing that the choice I made destroyed everything that mattered. Good. Eliana's voice was merciless. I hope the realization burned. I hope it kept you awake at night. I hope you drowned in regret, the way I drowned in single motherhood while you enjoyed your appropriate life. There was nothing appropriate about it, Stuart said with quiet intensity. Every dinner was silent. Every night sleeping in separate rooms felt like dying slowly. She wanted children, and I couldn't give her any because I already had children I'd abandoned. The company thrived and I felt nothing. Success tasted like ashes because I'd traded real life for an empty victory. Stop trying to make me pity you, Eliana snapped. Your comfortable hell doesn't compare to what I survived. You had a warm bed and full bank accounts. I had 2 screaming infants, no sleep, and terror every single day that I wasn't enough for them. You were more than enough. They're remarkable, Eliana. Watching them from a distance, I could see they're extraordinary, and it's all because of you. Stuart's voice cracked. But they're also mine, and I've missed everything. First steps, first words, first days of school. I gave up those moments to save people who didn't need saving, as much as I needed my own family. Those people kept their jobs, Eliana pointed out coldly. The company recovered within 3 years. The marriage wasn't even necessary, just the fastest solution. My mother pushed it because she couldn't conceive of sacrificing social standing for something as ephemeral as love. Stuart laughed bitterly. I let her convince me that duty mattered more than happiness. And by the time I realized the company would have survived anyway, you were gone. And I thought I'd lost you forever. Eliana processed this. The knowledge that his sacrifice had been unnecessary, making everything worse somehow. So you destroyed us for nothing. I destroyed everything for nothing, Stuart corrected. My marriage was hell. My relationship with my mother never recovered because I finally saw her for what she is, someone who values appearance over substance. The company thrived, and I hated every moment of running it because it represented everything I'd lost. And now I'm here, begging for scraps of involvement in the lives of daughters who don't know I exist. They know you exist now, Eliana said harshly. Olivia asked me who you were. She's smart and curious, and she's not going to let this go. Amelia hasn't asked yet, but she will. You've contaminated the peace we built. I'll tell them the truth if you let me. That I'm their father, that I made terrible choices, that their mother is the strongest person I've ever known, and they should be grateful every day that they got her instead of me. They don't need a father who shows up years too late carrying guilt like a badge of honor. Eliana's eyes flashed. If you think you can waltz in here, confess your sins, and become part of our lives through sheer persistence, you're delusional. Then what do I do? Stuart asked desperately. How do I fix something I broke so thoroughly? You don't, Eliana said with brutal finality. Some things stay broken. You live with that reality and stop expecting redemption you haven't earned. She turned to leave, but Stuart's next words stopped her. I'm not asking for redemption. I'm asking for the chance to be present, even from the margins. Let me work this land. Let me exist in the same space as my daughters. Let me show through actions what I couldn't show through words. Not as their father, because you're right, I haven't earned that. But as someone committed to being here day after day, whether you accept me or not. Eliana looked back at him, this man who'd once been her entire world and was now a painful stranger. You want to work? Fine. Tomorrow morning my irrigation system needs repair. Be here at dawn. Bring tools and be prepared for actual labor, not the gentlemanly clearing of brush. You work on my terms, following my orders, and if you complain once about blisters or exhaustion, I'll throw you off my property and make sure you can never come back. Stuart nodded. accepting the olive branch wrapped in thorns. And Stuart, Eliana's voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. The twins don't know who you are yet, and they won't until I decide the time is right. If you so much as hint at being their father before I give permission, I will make your life a living hell in ways you can't imagine. Are we clear? Crystal, Stuart said. Eliana walked back to her farmhouse, leaving Stuart standing in dirt and fading light, committed to a path he didn't fully understand but knew he had to walk. Inside, Olivia pressed her face against the window, watching her mother return, watching the stranger pack his tools. Her mind working through puzzles she didn't yet have all the pieces to solve. Amelia appeared beside her sister, their hands linking automatically. Who is he, Liv? I don't know, Olivia whispered, but Mom knows him. Did you see her face? She looked like she wanted to hurt him, Amelia observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. Or like she already had been hurt, Olivia corrected. Her writer's mind passing expressions adults thought children couldn't read. Something happened between them. Something big. The twins stood together watching twilight claim the farm, sensing that their world was shifting in ways they couldn't name, but would soon understand whether they were ready or not. Chapter 6. The Daughter's Eyes. Stuart arrived at dawn, carrying tools and a humility that sat awkwardly on shoulders used to command. Eliana was already working, knee-deep in mud where the main irrigation line had burst, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She glanced up as he approached, her expression unreadable. "Hand me the wrench," she ordered without greeting. They worked in tense silence, Stuart following her terse instructions, learning the intricate system she'd designed and maintained alone. His hands, still healing from previous days' labor, screamed protest as he dug through rocky soil. He didn't complain. Eliana watched him from the corner of her eye, waiting for weakness, finding none. The twins appeared mid-morning, carrying water and sandwiches their mother had prepared before dawn. They stopped short, seeing the stranger working beside Eliana, their identical expressions cycling through surprise and curiosity. "Mom, who's that?" Amelia asked with characteristic bluntness. Eliana straightened, wiping mud from her face. "His name is Stuart. He's helping with some repairs." Her tone warned against further questions. Olivia studied Stuart with unnerving intensity, those grey eyes so like his own, seeming to see through surface to substance. "Do we know you from somewhere?" Stuart's breath caught. "I don't think so." "You look familiar," Olivia pressed, her writer's mind cataloguing details. "Olivia, enough," Eliana interrupted. "Why don't you two start on the weeding we discussed? The back garden needs attention." The twins obeyed reluctantly, Olivia glancing back multiple times as they walked away. Stuart watched them go, his daughters, these miraculous beings he had no right to know, his heart fracturing with each step that carried them further from him. "Don't look at them like that," Eliana said sharply once the girls were out of earshot. "Don't you dare look at them with longing when you created this distance yourself." "How am I supposed to look at my own daughters?" Stuart asked quietly. "Like strangers, because that's what they are to you. That's what you made them when you chose money over the possibility of them." The work continued, brutal and relentless. Stuart's body screamed, muscles he'd forgotten existed announcing their protest. But he kept pace with Eliana, matching her stamina through sheer determination, refusing to be the weak city man she clearly expected him to be. Lunchtime found them sitting in dirt, sharing water from the same canteen in grudging practicality. The twins worked in the visible distance, their laughter carrying on summer air, the sound like music Stuart had no right to hear. "Olivia wants to be a writer," Eliana said suddenly, the words catching Stuart off guard. "She fills notebooks with stories about magical places and brave heroines. She's brilliant and sensitive and too smart for her own good sometimes." Stuart listened, hungry for any detail about the daughters he knew nothing about. "Amelia wants to be a scientist. She conducts experiments constantly, drives me crazy with questions I can't answer. She's fierce and protective and doesn't trust easily." Eliana's voice held fierce pride. "They're perfect, Stuart. I built them perfect despite your absence. I can see that," Stuart said softly. Everything about them shines. They shine because I made sure they never felt the lack of you, Eliana continued, her voice hard. Every time they asked about a father, I told them love came in many forms, and they had more than enough. Every school event meant for families, I was there, being both parents, making sure they never felt incomplete. Did they believe you? Stuart asked. Children believe what they need to believe to feel safe, Eliana said. But there were moments where I saw questions in their eyes, wondering why they were different, why other kids had two parents and they had one. Those moments killed me, Stuart. Knowing I was enough for them practically, but couldn't fill the conceptual space of a missing father. Stuart said nothing, letting her words land with their full weight. Olivia asked me once if fathers left because daughters weren't good enough, Eliana continued, her voice thick with suppressed emotion. She was 6 years old, wondering if her own worthiness was why she didn't have a dad. I held her and told her that fathers who leave are broken, not the children they abandon, but I don't know if she really believed me. I was broken, Stuart acknowledged. I am broken, but not because of them, because of choices I made that broke everything that mattered. Days became weeks, and Stuart showed up every morning without fail. He worked alongside Eliana, learning the rhythms of the farm, understanding the life she'd built through sweat and stubbornness. The twins grew accustomed to his presence, Olivia warming incrementally, asking careful questions about his life, his work, his thoughts on books she was reading. Amelia remained distant, watching him with suspicion that reminded Stuart painfully of Eliana's own guarded heart. One afternoon, Stuart found Olivia alone in the barn, writing in one of her eternal notebooks. She looked up as he entered, no fear in her expression, only curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why do you come here every day?" "Mom pays you, but I don't think that's why." Olivia's eyes held that unsettling perception children sometimes possess. "You look at us like you're sad, but also happy." "I don't understand it." Stuart sat on a hay bale, choosing words with the care of someone defusing a bomb. "Your mother and I knew each other a long time ago. I hurt her badly by making wrong choices. Now I'm trying to show I'm not the same person who made those mistakes." "Are you?" Olivia asked. "The same person?" "I hope not," Stuart said honestly. "The old me chose easy over right. The new me is trying to choose right, even when it's impossibly hard." "Mom's angry at you," Olivia observed. "I can tell even though she tries to hide it." "Did you love her back when you knew each other?" The question pierced Stuart's heart. "Yes, more than I knew how to love anything." "Then why did you hurt her?" "Because I was afraid. Because I let other people tell me what mattered. Because I was young and stupid and thought I could protect everyone by sacrificing what I loved most." Stuart met her eyes, those grey eyes that mirrored his own. "I learned too late that some sacrifices don't protect anyone. They just destroy what's precious." Olivia processed this with the seriousness of someone older than her years. "My book has a character who made a bad choice and spent the whole story trying to fix it. I don't know how to end it yet. How does someone fix a mistake that big?" "I don't think they do," Stuart admitted. "I think they just commit to being better day after day, whether anyone forgives them or not. Not for redemption, but because it's the only honest way forward." Amelia appeared in the barn doorway, her face suspicious. "Olivia, Mom wants you." Olivia gathered her notebooks reluctantly. "I hope you figure out how to fix your mistake," she told Stuart. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better." After she left, Amelia lingered, her stance defensive. "I don't know who you really are, but I know Mom gets sad after you leave. Whatever happened between you two, it hurt her bad, and I don't forgive people who hurt my mom. Neither do I," Stuart said quietly. "Which makes forgiving myself impossible." Amelia studied him with hard eyes that held no mercy. "Good, you shouldn't get to forgive yourself for free." She left him there. And Stuart understood that Amelia saw through every attempt at redemption to the truth. He was a man trying to rebuild a life he'd demolished, and nothing he did would ever fully erase the original destruction. That night, Lying in the small trailer he'd moved onto his property, Stuart stared at the ceiling and thought about his daughters. Olivia, open-hearted and willing to see the good in people. Amelia, fierce and protective, guarding her mother's heart with a warrior's dedication. Both of them perfect, both of them strangers he desperately wanted to know. He thought about Eliana, working herself to exhaustion, building an empire from dirt while he'd inherited one and felt nothing. He thought about the choices that led him here, the moment he turned away from love, the years of emptiness that followed. Redemption wasn't possible. He understood that now. But presence was. Being here day after day, proving through actions what words could never convey. Not for forgiveness, but because these people deserved someone who showed up. Whether convenient or not, Stuart fell asleep determined to be better tomorrow than he was today, knowing it would never be enough, but refusing to let that stop him from trying. Chapter 7. The Unraveling. The routine Stuart had established felt almost normal, until the morning he arrived to find Eliana's mother standing on the porch like a sentinel. Stuart's stomach dropped. He'd spent years avoiding this woman, knowing she represented every choice he'd made wrong, every consequence he'd tried to outrun. She descended the steps with the measured grace of someone approaching an enemy, her face carved from years of single-handedly raising daughters and bitter knowledge. Where Eliana had built walls of ice, her mother radiated a heat that promised destruction. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here," she said without preamble, her voice low enough not to carry to wherever the twins might be. "I'm working the land," Stuart replied, knowing how inadequate that sounded. "You're trespassing on a life you abandoned." She moved closer, and Stuart forced himself not to step back. "I held my daughter through labor when she almost died, bringing your children into this world. I watched her cry herself to sleep night after night that first year, exhausted and terrified and alone. I saw her build this farm with bleeding hands, while you lived in comfort with your strategic wife. Each word was a surgical strike, designed to wound, and Stuart let them land without defense because he deserved every single cut. I didn't know about the pregnancy," Stuart said weakly. "Because you didn't stay long enough to find out," Eliana's mother countered. "She was going to tell you that day. She had the test in her pocket, joy written all over her face. Then you destroyed her with your noble sacrifice speech. And she made the smart choice to protect her children from a father who'd already proven he'd abandoned them." Stuart had suspected, had known deep down, but hearing it confirmed felt like being gutted. "I would have stayed if I'd known, would you?" She laughed bitterly. "Or would you have felt even more trapped, resenting those babies for making your impossible choice harder? My daughter saved you from yourself, and saved her children from a father who might have stayed physically, but left emotionally. That's not who I am." Stuart protested. "That's exactly who you were," she corrected. "Maybe you changed. Maybe you haven't, but those girls don't need a father who's trying to make himself feel better about past mistakes. They need someone who puts them first consistently, not someone working through guilt." "I'm here because I love them," Stuart said desperately. "Because they're mine, they're not yours. You gave up ownership when you walked away." Eliana's mother's eyes held no mercy. "Biology doesn't make you a father any more than signing a check makes you generous. Fatherhood is earned through presence, sacrifice, showing up when it's hard. You've been here weeks. That doesn't erase years of absence." Stuart had no response adequate to that truth. The door opened and Eliana emerged, her face shifting from surprise to resignation when she saw the confrontation. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Protecting my grandchildren," her mother replied, without looking away from Stuart. "Someone has to make sure this man understands what he destroyed and what he'll never get back." "I can handle this myself," Eliana said firmly. "Like you've been handling everything yourself since he left?" Her mother finally turned. "You're too soft on him, letting him work here, letting him near the twins. He should be nowhere near this family." "That's not your decision," Eliana said, her voice carrying steel. "This is my farm, my daughters, my choice." Mother and daughter locked eyes in a battle of wills Stuart felt privileged and pained to witness. Finally, Eliana's mother looked away first, acknowledging her daughter's authority, even as disapproval radiated from every line of her body. "Fine, but if he hurts those girls the way he hurt you, I won't be responsible for what happens." She turned back to Stuart. "Understand this, I don't care about your guilt or your growth or your redemption arc. I care about two little girls who've built a life without you and don't need their peace destroyed by a father trying to absolve himself. Tread carefully, or you'll answer to me in ways the law won't protect you from." She left in a truck that kicked up dust like a departing storm, leaving Stuart and Eliana in uncomfortable silence. "She's protective," Eliana said unnecessarily. "She loves you and the twins," Stuart replied. "I can't fault her for that. She's also right," Eliana admitted quietly. "About most of it, anyway. You're here partly for them, but also for yourself. To fix something inside you that broke when you made the wrong choice." Stuart couldn't deny it. "I need to know something," Eliana continued, her voice carrying an exhaustion that went beyond physical labor. "If we gave you a chance, if we let you truly into our lives, how long before you make another impossible choice and leave again? How long before your mother or your work or some new obligation becomes more important than these girls?" "That won't happen," Stuart said with conviction he prayed was true. "You don't know that." Eliana's eyes held bitter wisdom. "People think they've changed until circumstances test them. You showed up here claiming you're different, but you've only been tested by hard work and my anger. What happens when real life intervenes? When your company needs you? When your mother demands something? When choosing us means losing something else important?" "I'll choose you," Stuart said. "Them, every time? Words are easy," Eliana said wearily. "You said you loved me once, promised me forever, then left before the sun rose. Your words mean nothing until time proves them true." The conversation ended there, both of them returning to work, the space between them filled with questions neither could answer. Stuart threw himself into labor with an intensity born of frustration, trying to prove through action what words couldn't convey. Olivia found him late afternoon, wiping sweat from his eyes with a dirt-stained shirt. She carried lemonade and that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through him to uncomfortable truths. "Are you going to stay?" she asked without preamble. "Yes," Stuart answered. "Mom doesn't believe you." "Neither does Grandma." Olivia handed him the glass. "Amelia thinks you're going to hurt us somehow, and I don't know what to think." "What do you want to think?" Stuart asked carefully. Olivia considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything. "I want to believe people can change, that mistakes don't define you forever. But I also know Mom's scared, even though she pretends she's just angry. She's scared you'll make us love you and then leave, like you did before." The perceptiveness of it stole Stuart's breath. "I can't promise the future," he said honestly. "But I can promise that every day I wake up, I'll choose to be here. Not because it's easy or comfortable, but because it's right. Because you and Amelia and your mother deserve someone who shows up consistently." "That's what Mom always says," Olivia observed. "That love is showing up, not just feeling things." "Your mother is the smartest person I've ever known," Stuart said. "She says you used to be smart too before you got stupid." Olivia tilted her head. "Can people get smart again after being stupid?" "I'm trying to find out," Stuart admitted. Olivia smiled slightly, and Stuart saw Eliana in that expression, the hint of warmth beneath careful guardedness. "I hope you do." "Everyone deserves a chance to fix their mistakes." She left him there, and Stuart felt something shift inside his chest. Hope maybe, or just the terrible understanding that he was being given a gift he'd done nothing to earn, a child's willingness to believe in possibility. That night, lying in his trailer, Stuart made a decision. Tomorrow, he would tell his mother he was liquidating his involvement in the company, keeping only what was necessary to provide for his family, stepping away from the world that had demanded his soul in exchange for success. He would rebuild his life here, on land adjacent to the family he'd lost, proving through years, if necessary, that he meant every word. Some bridges burned forever, but some could be rebuilt plank by plank through patient work and unwavering presence. Stuart didn't know which category his relationship with Eliana and the twins fell into, but he was determined to find out, regardless of how long it took or how much it cost him. Chapter 8. The Mother's Reckoning. Stuart's mother arrived like an avenging angel dressed in designer clothes, her car ostentatiously expensive against the humble backdrop of the farm. Stuart was replacing fence posts when he saw her, and his entire body tensed with the instinct of a child sensing punishment. She exited the vehicle with the imperious grace of someone used to commanding rooms, her eyes sweeping the property with barely concealed disdain. She spotted Stuart and approached with the determination of someone on a mission. "What are you doing here?" she demanded without greeting. "Working," Stuart replied, not putting down his tools. "Working? You're playing farmer while your actual responsibilities languish?" Her voice cut like a blade. "I've been calling for days. Board meetings you've missed, decisions that need your input, and you're here doing manual labor? I'm building a life that matters," Stuart said evenly. His mother's expression shifted from irritation to something colder. "This is about that woman, isn't it? The one you were infatuated with years ago." "Stuart, I thought we moved past this phase. Her name is Eliana, and we didn't move past anything. You forced me into a marriage that destroyed both our lives to save a company that recovered anyway." Stuart finally set down his tools, facing his mother fully. "I spent years living half alive because I followed your guidance. I'm done with that. You're being dramatic," his mother dismissed. "You had a comfortable life, a successful career, respect in your community. What more could you want?" "Love," Stuart said simply. "Purpose. A life that feels real." His mother's laugh was sharp. "Love, you sound like a teenager. Adults understand that life requires sacrifice and compromise. You made your choice years ago. I made the choice you demanded, and it broke everything." Stuart's voice hardened. "I'm not making that mistake again." "What mistake?" Eliana's voice rang across the yard. She approached with the confidence of someone on her own land, her eyes taking in Stuart's mother with cool assessment. "The mistake of letting you control his life." Stuart's mother turned, and the clash of two powerful women meeting felt like atmospheric pressure shifting. "You must be the farm girl who's been distracting my son from his responsibilities, and you must be the woman who destroyed her son's chance at happiness to protect a company." Eliana's voice dripped honey over poison. "I've heard so much about you. I doubt you have the capacity to understand the complexities of maintaining a family legacy," Stuart's mother said dismissively. "I understand perfectly," Eliana countered. "You valued appearances over authenticity, money over love, control over your son's autonomy. That's not complex. That's just sad." Stuart's mother's face flushed. "You know nothing about the sacrifices required to maintain a family's position." "I know everything about sacrifice," Eliana said, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "I sacrificed sleep, health, comfort, and years of my life raising 2 children alone. What have you sacrificed? Because, from where I stand, you sacrificed your son's happiness for your own comfort." The twins had emerged from the house, drawn by raised voices, watching the confrontation with wide eyes. Stuart's mother noticed them for the first time, and her expression shifted as she processed their ages. "Their resemblance to Stuart are those," she began. "None of your concern," Eliana interrupted. "They're my daughters, raised without your family's money or influence or toxic values. They're remarkable despite having no grandfather to know and no paternal grandmother who cared enough to exist. Stuart, are those your children?" His mother's voice held shock and calculation. "They're Eliana's daughters," Stuart said firmly. "Daughters I had no right to until recently. Daughters I'm trying to earn the privilege of knowing." His mother's mind worked visibly, assessing implications, social consequences, potential complications. "This changes everything. If you have children, legitimate children, the family legacy—" "Stop!" Stuart commanded with a force that surprised everyone, including himself. "Those girls are not pawns in your legacy games. They're people who've built beautiful lives without us, and if I'm lucky enough to be part of their future, it will be on their terms, not yours." "Don't be naive," his mother said. "Children require resources, education, opportunities we can provide. They have everything they need," Eliana said fiercely. "A mother who loves them, a home that's secure, a life rich with meaning. Your money can't buy what matters, and your influence has no power here." Stuart's mother reached into her purse and pulling out a checkbook with the casual confidence of someone used to solving problems with money. "Everyone has a price. Name yours and disappear." Let Stuart return to his life without complications. The silence that followed vibrated with potential violence. Eliana laughed, and the sound held no humor whatsoever. "You think you can buy me off? Purchase my silence like I'm some inconvenience to be managed?" She stepped closer, and Stuart's mother actually retreated a step. "Let me be very clear. Your money means nothing here. Your social position holds no weight. Your threats have no teeth. This is my land, my family, my life that you have zero claim to." "Stuart is my son," his mother protested. "Stuart is a grown man you manipulated into destroying his own happiness," Eliana corrected. "But he's here now, making different choices, and you have no authority over those choices anymore." Stuart's mother turned to him, desperation cracking through her imperious facade. "You're throwing away everything we built. The company, the reputation, the life your father worked for." "Dad worked for a paycheck and died young from stress," Stuart said quietly. "I'm not following that path. I'm done prioritizing profit over people, image over substance. If that disappoints you, I'll learn to live with it. You'll regret this," his mother warned. "The only thing I regret is not making this choice years ago," Stuart replied. His mother looked between Stuart, Eliana, and the twins watching from the porch. Her face went through a series of calculations before settling on cold dismissal. "When this little rebellion fails, when you realize you've traded security for sentiment, don't come back expecting welcome." "I won't," Stuart promised. She left with the same ostentatious display she'd arrived with, her car kicking up dust that settled slowly over the property. Stuart stood frozen, processing what he'd just done, the bridge he'd just burned. Eliana watched him with an expression he couldn't read. "Did you mean that? About choosing us over her expectations?" "Every word," Stuart said. "It's easy to say in the heat of confrontation," Eliana observed. "Living it day after day, that's harder." "Then watch me live it," Stuart challenged. "Watch me choose this life, these daughters, this existence over everything else, repeatedly and consistently, until you have no choice but to believe it." Olivia approached cautiously, Amelia beside her, both girls processing what they'd witnessed. "Who was that lady?" Olivia asked. "Someone from my old life," Stuart said. "Someone I just said goodbye to permanently." "She seemed mean," Amelia observed with characteristic bluntness. "She's afraid," Stuart said, surprising himself with the insight. "Afraid of losing control, afraid of things changing, afraid of a world that doesn't operate by her rules." "Are you afraid?" Olivia asked him directly. "Terrified," Stuart admitted, "but not of change. Of failing you and your sister and your mother again. Of proving I haven't learned anything from past mistakes." Amelia studied him with those hard, appraising eyes. "At least you're honest about being scared. Mom says brave people aren't the ones who don't feel fear. They're the ones who feel it and do the right thing anyway." Stuart looked at Eliana, seeing in her face the woman who'd raised these remarkable children to understand courage. "Your mother is right about most things. She's right about everything," Amelia corrected fiercely. Eliana's lips twitched in what might have been almost a smile. "Back to work," she ordered. "All this drama doesn't change the fact that the West Field needs irrigation." They dispersed to their tasks, and Stuart returned to his fence posts, feeling lighter despite having just severed ties with his mother permanently. He'd made his choice, publicly and irrevocably, choosing the uncertain promise of this new life over the comfortable emptiness of his old one. Across the yard, Eliana watched him work, her expression complex and unreadable, something shifting in the careful walls she'd built around her heart. Chapter 9. The Price of Truth. Discovery happened on an ordinary afternoon when Amelia climbed onto a chair to reach her favorite cereal from the top shelf. The box tipped, sending a cascade of documents Eliana kept hidden in the cabinet above, papers she thought were safely out of reach. Away from curious daughters who read everything they could get their hands on. Birth certificates fluttered down like autumn leaves, and Amelia caught one reflexively. Her eyes scanned the document with the automatic curiosity of a child who reads compulsively, and then stopped, freezing on a single line that rewrote her entire understanding of reality. Father, Stuart Stone. The name meant nothing to Amelia at first, just letters on official paper. Then memory connected dots, and the stranger who'd been working on their property for months suddenly had a name that matched. The one printed in stark black ink, declaring him her father. Olivia entered the kitchen to find her sister's statue still, the birth certificate trembling in her hands. Amelia, what's wrong? Amelia handed her the paper wordlessly. Olivia read it once, twice, 3 times, her face cycling through confusion to understanding to something too complicated for any single emotion to capture. This can't be right, Olivia whispered. It has his name, Amelia said, her voice flat with shock. Stuart Stone, that's him, the man who's been here all these months. He's our father. The truth detonated in their small kitchen like a silent bomb, destroying the careful narrative their mother had constructed. The comfortable lie that their family was complete as it was. Eliana found them like that, frozen in the ruins of innocence, holding evidence of the secret she'd tried so hard to protect them from. Her face drained of all color. Girls, she started, but Amelia cut her off. You lied to us. The accusation rang clear and sharp. All these months he's been here, you knew and you didn't tell us. I was protecting you, Eliana said, her voice raw. From what? Olivia asked, tears starting to track down her face. From knowing we have a father? From having the chance to know him? From being hurt when he left again, Eliana said desperately. From building hope only to have it shattered like I did. That wasn't your choice to make, Amelia said, and the anger in her young voice carried years of accumulated questions finally finding their target. We asked you about our father our whole lives, and you gave us nothing. Just vague answers about him making choices. You made it sound like he wanted nothing to do with us. He didn't want us, Olivia sobbed. The certificate says he's our father, but he wasn't there. He left you, left us, chose something else instead. Eliana knelt, trying to gather her daughters close, but Amelia pulled away, her face a mask of betrayal. Did he know about us when he left? The question hung in the air, weighted with the power to reshape everything again. No, Eliana admitted. I found out about the pregnancy after he was gone. I chose not to tell him. You chose. Amelia's voice rose. You took away his chance to know us and our chance to know him. He made his choice when he left, Eliana defended, her own tears starting. He chose obligation over love, duty over us. I wasn't going to subject you to a father who might resent your existence, but he came back, Olivia said through her tears. He's here now. He's been here for months, working, trying. You said he was just helping, but he came back for us, didn't he? And you still didn't tell us. Eliana had no defense adequate to that truth. Stuart arrived for his daily work to find chaos. The twins were in their room, Olivia crying, Amelia furiously silent. Eliana stood in the yard, looking broken in ways he'd never seen, even after he'd left her years ago. They know, she said simply. Stuart's world tilted. How? Found their birth certificates. Saw your name. Put it together like the smart girls they are. Eliana's voice held defeat. They're hurt and angry and feel lied to, and they're right to feel all of those things. Can I talk to them? Stuart asked. I don't know if they'll want to talk to you, Eliana said, but yes, they deserve to hear your side, whatever that's worth. Stuart approached the twins' room like a man walking to his own trial. He knocked softly, and Amelia's voice, hard and unwelcoming, told him to come in. They sat on opposite beds, mirroring each other in grief and fury. Olivia's face was tear-streaked and broken. Amelia's was dry and closed off, her anger a shield against deeper pain. Can I sit? Stuart asked. Do what you want, Amelia said coldly. Apparently everyone in our lives makes decisions without asking us. Stuart sat on the floor, making himself lower, less threatening. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. Why did you leave? Olivia asked, her voice small and hurt. Why didn't you want us? The question shattered something in Stuart's chest. I didn't know about you. Your mother found out she was pregnant after I'd already gone, and she chose not to tell me. Not out of cruelty, but because she thought she was protecting you from someone who'd already proven he'd choose wrong when it mattered. But why did you leave her? Amelia pressed. What was more important than love? Stuart took a breath, choosing words carefully, knowing they would shape these girls' understanding of their entire existence. I was told our family company was failing, that hundreds of people would lose their jobs unless I married someone who could save it. I believed that saving all those families was worth sacrificing my own happiness. I thought I was being noble, choosing the greater good over personal desire. That's stupid, Amelia said bluntly. Love isn't less important than business. You're absolutely right, Stuart agreed. It was stupid. Worse than stupid, it was cowardly. I let myself be convinced that duty mattered more than love, that I was being heroic by sacrificing what I wanted for what others needed. But I was just afraid. Afraid of choosing my own happiness, afraid of fighting for what mattered, afraid of building a life that didn't meet other people's expectations. Did you love her? Olivia asked. Our mom. More than anything, Stuart said without hesitation. She was everything real and honest and good in my life. Losing her broke something in me that I don't think ever healed. Then why didn't you come back? Olivia's question held all the pain of a child trying to understand adult failures. If you loved her so much, why did you stay away? Because I thought I'd burned that bridge permanently. Because I was ashamed of my choices. Because I built a life that looked successful but felt empty. And I was too broken to imagine deserving anything better. Stuart met their eyes. These daughters he'd never held as babies, never watched grow. I didn't come back for years because I was a coward. When I finally found out about you, about the farm, I didn't approach directly because I was still a coward. I've been working my way toward brave, but it's slow going when you've spent years being weak. Do you want us? Amelia asked bluntly. Or do you want to stop feeling guilty? The question's brutal honesty demanded equal honesty in return. Both, Stuart admitted. I want to know you because you're my daughters and I've missed everything. But I also want to prove to myself I'm not the man who walked away. I can't separate those motivations cleanly. All I know is that being here near you feels like the first real thing I've done in years. Olivia processed this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. What if we don't want you? What if knowing you have daughters isn't enough for us to want a father? Then I'll respect that, Stuart said, though the words cost him everything. I'll keep working the land next door, being present without forcing my way into your lives. You don't owe me anything. Not forgiveness, not affection, not even acknowledgement. I'm the one who has debts to pay, not you. I'm so angry, Olivia whispered. At you for leaving, at Mom for not telling us, at everyone for making choices that affected our lives without asking us. You have every right to that anger, Stuart said. I don't want to forgive you, Amelia declared, her voice hard. Maybe ever. You weren't there for 9 years. 9 years of birthdays and school plays and all the moments fathers are supposed to be at. You don't get to just show up and be forgiven because you feel bad now. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Stuart said. I'm asking for the chance to be present going forward. Not to make up for the past, because that's impossible, but to be someone you can count on from today forward. Counting on people is how you get hurt, Amelia said, and the wisdom in her young voice broke Stuart's heart. Sometimes, Stuart agreed, but sometimes it's how you build something worth having. Your mother taught you to be strong and independent, which is remarkable. But I hope she also taught you that letting people in, carefully and with boundaries, is part of being fully human. Olivia looked at her sister, some silent communication passing between them. We need time, she finally said. Time to be angry, time to process, time to figure out what we want. Take all the time you need, Stuart said. He left them there, these daughters he'd lost before knowing them. These remarkable beings, shaped entirely by Eliana's strength and love. In the kitchen, Eliana waited, her face a landscape of fear and hope and exhaustion. "They need time," Stuart reported. "So do I," Eliana said quietly. "Time to figure out how to parent through this. Time to understand if I made the right choice, protecting them, or if I robbed them of something they deserved." "You did the best you could with impossible circumstances," Stuart said. "So did you," Eliana acknowledged reluctantly. "But our best wasn't good enough for them. Now we have to figure out how to be better." They stood in the wreckage of secrets revealed. Two people who'd loved each other once, destroyed each other slowly, and were now trying to build something new from pieces that didn't fit together the way they used to. Outside, the farm continued its rhythms, indifferent to human drama, demanding attention regardless of emotional upheaval. Life didn't stop for revelations or heartbreak. It simply continued, requiring participation whether you felt ready or not. Chapter 10. The Harvest of Becoming. Autumn arrived with its usual transformation, painting the farm in golds and crimsons, bringing with it the season's biggest harvest and the culmination of months of careful, painful growth. Stuart had become a permanent fixture, no longer just the stranger working the adjacent land, but someone integrated into the farm's daily rhythms. Though his exact title remained undefined and complicated, the twins had settled into an uneasy relationship with him. Olivia had softened considerably, her natural openness and curiosity gradually overcoming hurt and anger. She asked him questions about his life, shared her writing, allowed small connections that felt like gifts Stuart didn't deserve. Amelia remained guarded, her fierce protectiveness of Eliana manifesting as continued distrust, though even she had begun to thaw incrementally, accepting his presence, if not his history. Stuart had restructured his entire life around being present. He sold his interests in the company to partners who'd long wanted control, keeping only modest investments that provided income without demanding attention. He built a small house on his property, permanent and solid, a statement of commitment that couldn't be undone with a sudden departure. Every morning he arrived at Eliana's farm before dawn. Every evening he left only after ensuring everything necessary was done. The twins' school held a harvest celebration, and for the first time they invited Stuart to attend. Not as their father, that word remained too weighted, too complicated, but as Stuart, the man who'd somehow become part of their expanded definition of family. He sat between Olivia and Amelia in the school auditorium, Eliana on Olivia's other side, the four of them an unconventional unit that drew curious looks from other families. When Olivia's essay about perseverance won recognition and she bounded onto the stage to accept her certificate, Stuart felt his throat tighten with pride for this remarkable girl he was just beginning to know. Later, at the farm, the twins went to bed early, exhausted from the day's excitement. Stuart and Eliana found themselves alone on the porch where everything had begun and ended a decade earlier, the space heavy with shared history. "They're extraordinary," Stuart said quietly. "You built something perfect with them." "They built themselves," Eliana corrected. "I just tried to give them space to grow." Silence settled, comfortable for the first time in months, maybe years. "Do you regret it?" Stuart asked. "Not telling me about the pregnancy?" Eliana considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I regret that they grew up without a father, but I don't regret protecting them from uncertainty. You hadn't proven you'd choose them over convenience. I couldn't risk their hearts on your maybe commitment. And now," Stuart ventured, "now you've been here for months. You've restructured your life, stood up to your mother, shown up consistently even when it was hard and unrewarding." Eliana's voice held something softer than the rage he'd grown accustomed to. "You're proving something, though I'm still not entirely sure what." "That I'm not the man who left," Stuart said. "That I can be someone worthy of existing in their orbit, even if I'm never their father in any traditional sense." Is that enough for you? Eliana asked, being peripheral to their lives. Stuart thought about this, about the question beneath the question. It has to be. I don't get to demand centrality in lives I wasn't there to build. But being here, watching them grow, knowing I'm available if they need me, that's more than I thought I'd ever have. Eliana studied him in the fading light. This man who'd been her everything and her greatest pain, now transformed into something neither of them quite knew how to categorize. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, she said with quiet honesty. The hurt went too deep, shaped too much of who I became. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Stuart replied. I'm not even sure I deserve your continued tolerance of my presence. But you keep showing up anyway, Eliana observed. Because it's the right thing to do, Stuart said simply. Because those girls deserve consistency, even from the parent who failed them first. Because you deserve someone reliable in the construction of this family, whatever shape it takes. What about what you deserve? Eliana asked. Stuart laughed softly, the sound holding no humor. I deserve the emptiness I had before finding you again. Everything beyond that is grace I haven't earned. Something in Eliana's expression shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that bordered on respect. You've changed. Not completely, maybe not enough, but substantially. The man I knew would never have had this conversation. He'd have been defensive, self-justifying, making excuses. That man destroyed everything worth having, Stuart said. I'm trying very hard not to be him anymore. They sat in silence as stars emerged, two people whose love story had ended in ashes, learning to exist in the aftermath, building something new from the ruins. Not romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but something honest and present, forged through suffering and shaped by commitment to two girls who deserved better than their beginning. Inside, Olivia stirred in her sleep, dreaming of stories with complicated endings. Amelia woke briefly, heard the murmur of adult voices from the porch, and felt something settle in her chest that might have been the beginning of trust, or at least the possibility of it. The farm stretched around them in the darkness, alive with the sounds of growing things, indifferent to human complications, demanding care regardless of emotional turmoil. Tomorrow would bring more work, more careful navigation of relationships being rebuilt, piece by painful piece. But tonight, for the first time in a decade, Stuart and Eliana existed in the same space without anger or regret, dominating everything. Just two people who'd hurt each other, learning to be better in the presence of the family they'd created. Are you staying for the harvest? Eliana asked as Stuart stood to leave. If you'll have me, Stuart replied. The work doesn't care about our feelings, Eliana said. We need every hand available. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something more valuable. Acknowledgement that Stuart had earned his place through consistent presence, that he'd become someone who could be counted on, even if the deeper wounds remained unhealed. Stuart walked back to his small house, looking at the stars that had witnessed everything, feeling lighter than he had in years. Not because he'd been forgiven, but because he'd become someone capable of being present regardless of forgiveness. Someone who showed up whether welcomed or tolerated, someone finally learning that love isn't always about grand gestures or passionate reunions. Sometimes love is patient work, quiet consistency, the unglamorous commitment to being there day after day, building trust so slowly it's barely perceptible until suddenly one day you realize something has shifted and the impossible might just become possible after all. Some love stories don't end with fireworks or fairy tales. They end with dirt under fingernails, children's laughter in the distance, and two people who learn that the hardest kind of love isn't falling or staying, but rebuilding what you destroyed and accepting that some things, once broken, never fit together the same way again.